Thank you all for staying, and now that we have you up here, mask off, and after that amazing movie, just thank you again.
Thanks for coming and being part of it. Thanks for the festival, which is a terrific venue to show anything, and an incredible bunch of hospitality and great people as well. So thank you.
Yeah. I got to see it beforehand on my little screen alone, and it's so much more powerful and impactful on people. So, just as to get us started, let us know a little bit how this came to you, how this project was born, and tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I'll start by saying that in the early 2000s, my father died of Parkinson's disease, and at the same time, I was going to film school at Columbia. And I would go down to the East Village where I'd watch, you saw Dan Paul's 49ers memorabilia, watch the 49ers, and I met Dan in a bar. After about 15 years or so, soon now we became fast friends, and we trade scripts and trade projects and talk about stuff. And at one point he leaned over to me in the middle of a Rams game and said, "I've got to tell you, I've got Parkinson's." He didn't really have to tell me, to be honest, because I saw the same sort of hanging face my dad had when he told me the same thing. Later, he and Chris were running these lines together, just meeting at an apartment and doing endgame on, at a desk between the two of them in Dan's one-room apartment in the East Village. And they told me about it, and I really wanted to be a part of any way to document it. As Chris talks about, his kids only had the chance to see him, for the sort of the first 15, 20 years of their lives as he was, and obviously it's a degenerative disease, so it's only getting worse for them. So this, I hope, is kind of like a memento and also sort of cause-driven for audiences to see them and understand what life with this disease is all about.
Wow, I mean, I was telling him last night when I met him, have any of you ever been lucky enough to see either of those actors before? And so they are, I met both of them very early, and they are both, to see them on stage, they're like lightning bolts of life. One very forceful and energetic and like just pure life force, and Chris is just pure comedy. He will make you laugh and cry at the same time all the time. So it's so beautiful to see them in this event captured while all that's still there.
It's true. I'll also say about them that allowed those two sort of forces were almost at opposite. Dan really went deep in this, and Chris, like almost like a chirping leprechaun, was willing to make a joke to deflect anything. And so they gave these sort of poles of how people respond, and then their wives as well. These sort of quadrants of how people respond to life with any huge challenge like Parkinson's is.
It seemed like almost like in the time is very fluid in this. What was the actual timeline of the whole thing?
We basically shot this over the course of the summer. They had this idea, and sort of a funny story. I sat down with them when we first were planning this out. We thought we'd set up a Indiegogo, which is like a GoFundMe sort of thing, and we talked about how much we'd raise. And I said, when we get to $20,000, let's look for a theater to start this up. Well, I think they misheard me, and I said $20 because day two, like, great, let's go. I'm like, I'm trying to produce this, raise money, direct it, and then later edit it, and such. And so it really was a race, like, with all these parts moving at once. Having them involved was really made it magical because they did make it really fun. I'm not a theater person. I learned on the fly about what it means to be in a room practicing and rehearsing. We, film people, every second is money. But in the theater, kick back, tell a story or two, tell another story, then remind someone of the story. Maybe later I'll get to rehearsing. It was very different for me to watch.
How, we were talking a little bit last night, and I think your early or your beginnings in movies were not in documentary in that form. So how did you take to it? What have you learned from it that you may do more from or more with? Or
well, I like to think that the work I started with is documentary in style. The 30-second movies that end with "That's why you can't trust," and then put a name of a candidate there. I work in political advertising. But I also did a lot of issue and advocacy work, sometimes making small or half-hour documentaries, whether for clients. Like I made a television documentary about environmentalists in Virginia in the 90s. And I went to film school at Columbia, hoping to do narrative work, but it's a very, very small, tight pyramid that's very hard to sort of crash. So, given the opportunity to direct something, even something documentary, thrilled me to no end. So I jumped in with both feet, and I really fell in love with it. I love working with them. I love the process. I love finding the story sort of 3 times. Once as you're ideating it, another time when you're shooting it, and then another time in the edit room. And then happily you get to also find it again over a beer at a festival like this, which is nice. And so I learned a ton making this piece, and I look forward to applying it.
Fantastic. You said most of your work hadn't been in theater. How much Beckett did you have in you? Because obviously you have a lot more in you now.
I certainly do. I loved Beckett, but the fiction and the plays in college, I really adored Murphy and Malloy and some of the other pieces. He really is groundbreaking in every way. And I do not have a lot of Beckett under my belt that will be for theater. I also am not a theater person, I'm a film person. So I went to the Cherry Lane with Dan, and we were looking for a place to do the play, and I looked up this poster, which was from when Joe Pravasi, who was our director, was in the first iteration of this in the United States. He played Claude, and it was, it said like, laugh riot, Ben Bradley, like, fell out of my chair. And I sort of elbowed Dan and said, like, I read this last night, and it's really dour and dark, it's not funny. He said, right, you read it, you didn't see it. When you see it, it's sort of like vaudevillian celebration of hilarity, kind of with this repetitive sort of sorrow mixed in. I mean, to my mind, if Beckett were writing today, he'd be like Dave Chappelle. I think that his viewpoint was stripping away all the artifice or specificity to get to the anchor of what makes life so brutally funny.
I was looking at the the PR material, and I don't know this quote. Who is it who said nothing is funnier than unhappiness? Is that Beckett? Or?
That's Nell in the play. In the play, we cut that into as a cutaway in the performance. But yeah, Nell says that, and I think that Beckett to some degree is right. I mean, all comedy is based in some kind of tragedy. Obviously, these guys are living a tragedy. I mean, all life, if you want to get really Beckett-y, is a tragedy. We're all heading, headlong to death. But then at the same time, as Chris says, quoting his character, you're on Earth. There's no cure for that. You have to live this experience, and that's what makes it so funny. And I kind of personally try to live that way. I try to make every sort of foible something to laugh at about myself or the people around me or whatever. And I think Beckett, while he's a Irishman writing in French, translating into English, it can be kind of hard to get to the funny sometimes, and that's what Joe talks about, how serious it can be and how great. But it's actually incredibly hilarious.
Great. I have a couple more questions, but I want to make sure we keep time to our time. So, does anybody out there have anything they would like to ask or say about the movie? Yeah. Well, we have microphones, so here it comes.
So how are they doing now?
Well, it is a degenerative disease with no cure, and it is. I shot this a while back, and they're. I'll say Dan has moved to Pasadena, so I guess he's doing better than 5th floor walk up in East Village. But they're both doing worse than we were when we shot this. They thought this was a difficult time, but as Ruthie said, it only gets worse, and obviously it has for them. They still love they join all the virtual festivals they can. They don't really travel much, but they're still doing that, really making people laugh or being very serious, but not as well as they were when we shot this.
I have one more question. How's Michael J. Fox in this film? Because I really thought one of the most very important moment in the film was the wife talking about Michael J. Fox. I wondered if he would ever come up with a film, because of course everyone knows about Michael's challenges around Parkinson's, and in some ways he has been such an incredible visionary and force in in raising consciousness and raising loads and loads and loads of money. And I read a number of his books, but it was really interesting because his books are very, if anybody has read them about his struggles, they're very traumatic and challenging, but they're also filled with so much like hope and optimism and his own sense of trying to get through this. And I thought that was really interesting what she talked about, which is that who is that guy, Michael J. Fox? Like, he's got all this money and he's always saying, I can get through this and I can climb a mountain or I can do this, and it's actually not that easy. But I think he would love this movie, and I wonder if he would also probably, if he loved it, which I'm sure he would help get it out there and get it to all the constituents that he has. So I'm just wondering, A, if you're going to try to get it to him, which you totally should. And I just, I think that, I just thought that was a really beautiful part of the film.
Yeah, first of all, we had, at one point, we had a meeting with someone from development at the Michael J. Fox Foundation. They only do medical research, but they offered that they would have a fundraiser, show a movie, and take half the money, which I appreciated. We didn't take it like that. But Joe is friends with the guy who played Michael's dad on whatever show it was in the 80s that he was on, and we're trying to get to him through that. I do think that it's true that celebrities and the like can make stuff seem that you can finesse it, but these working actors who are like lightning in a bottle on New York stages and are the foundation of the craft of being stage actors in New York and even film actors. These people who fill in the spaces in movies don't have, they build lives, middle-class lives in New York and LA too, but they don't have the wherewithal that Michael J. Fox does. And I wish they did, because I wish they had the sort of cushions that a life like that can offer. Very few people do, but I'd still let Michael J. Fox certainly to see this movie. We have dreams of it getting to him.
Yes, Beckett.
My father had Parkinson's as well, and it was brutal. I found Dan's looking into the camera and saying, "This isn't fair." Very difficult to take, not to take, but to absorb. They're both very young. Can you tell me when were they diagnosed, or at what age were they diagnosed with Parkinson's? It seems that they're tremendously young to be as far along as they are.
You're absolutely right. They were diagnosed mostly in their late 40s, which is really young for Parkinson's. There is early onset Parkinson's is mostly a genetic disorder, but there's they basically were diagnosed sort of around the same time, both in their late 40s, which again is early. And this sort of ending up as Hugh Cronin sort of lives that they both, I think, imagined, stolen from them. It is. I do think it's a tragedy. These guys are super gifted actors and wonderful people, and it just isn't fair.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the process that you went through to find the animation and kind of how you were pulling out the pieces of the story and kind of how that found its way into the overall piece?
Absolutely. The animator is a man named Song Riddle. Actually, what's interesting is that he has Tourette's, and he described it, and he's a friend of Dan's daughter, actually. He described it as, I have too much of the chemical, which people with Parkinson's don't have enough of, and I'd love to share it with these guys on a really balance. But what we decided was that we wanted to have their voices, Dan and Chris's voices, and we also wanted to find a way to share Beckett's voice. But we don't have recordings. We have a little bit of Watt in there from 1965, but we don't have Beckett transmitting Endgame to us. But we do have Dan and Chris doing it. But if they're talking it, it'll seem like it's still them talking about this experience. We wanted sort of to be Beckett's discussion. So by and large, it's not 100% logic in the film, but by and large, when we want Beckett to be describing the experience of Parkinson's, we've set it in the animation. And it's quotes from his play Endgame. Because, as we described, he wrote it as a metaphor for life with the disease after he cared for his mother to her death with the disease.
Yeah, I think there's a mic coming to you.
Speaking of first of all, thank you. It's a wonderful film. Speaking of Endgame, I was watching this and thinking, well, I don't know how this is going to turn out at the end, and I'm sure you were wondering the same thing. And I'm just wondering what thoughts went through your head about how you were going to plan the different endings depending on what might end up happening with their performance.
It's a great question. I knew that I really wanted them to do it well. And the idea that it would be a non-results oriented sandbox, which the director says at one point, I was like, no, I need a third act, please. But if it was a disaster, we'd have a drama, sort of, with the dip in the second act here when Dan can't remember his lines in the dress rehearsal the day before, if that had continued in the next day. And if they had done a terrific performance, then we'd have a triumphant, I guess, serial comedy, I guess, documentary, everything in Aristotelian terms. But whatever happened, I really wanted to follow it. I will say that the end was incredibly difficult. They finished the play and people cheered, but I thought there was something terribly missing, and I was thrilled when 10 months later the Parkinson's Unity Walk took place, and we get them as they sort of like walk off into the sunset, like sort of two gunslingers at the end of Shane or something like that. At the same time, finding what they could say about this to wrap it up was the hardest part of this whole process. I probably had 60 ideas and poured through Beckett, all of our interviews and everything like that to try to figure out how to end. And Dan being like, I hope this isn't the end, was a good way, I think, to say this is the end.
One last thought, or yet?
Well, thank you for this beautiful documentary and the effort you put into it. My question is more an observation. It is the focus you had on the people supporting the actors, so both the theater director, because that's not a given to support such a play with these impaired actors, and also the respective wives. So I think you did a brilliant job in actually highlighting how they were supporting each in their a different way with the different characteristics, how they actually supported that. So it was a great kind of feature of the documentary.
Thank you. I mean, I'll say as a member of what I guess I'll call the Parkinsons family, I witnessed this as well, and I watched how distorting it can be to a family, what it can mean to a wife. In this case, it was my mom, and I knew that was something that I wanted to feature here in a big way, because the disease really doesn't just affect the person who has it, but it really affects those people, as both Ruthie and Mary Beth say. It touches their relationships and what they can do and everything like that. I will say that when wrapping up and finishing like an interview with Mary Beth, I was putting stuff and she's like, so what happens next? And I said, well, I put this onto a drive and I downloaded. She's like, no, I mean with the disease. And I really didn't have the heart to tell her how it goes from here, because it's devastating, and for caregivers, and there are 60,000 Americans who come down with this disease every year. Those are 60,000 families who have to learn how to navigate how to help this person, and I wanted this to be kind of, while dramatic and hopefully beautiful and poetic, also kind of like a set of lessons so that people can recognize that what they need to do and how they can help their person having to face it, or having to help someone in their family help someone in their family.
I think it's about all we have time for, but thank you so much. That was incredibly moving and beautiful movie. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff. It's really you guys are really lucky. Everyone who lives in Middlebury, this is a wonderful resource and a terrific group of people putting this together. So thank you all.